Okay, welcome to my studio. So today I have a little video that's actually a recording from last week. It was a huge honor when I was invited on to Eric Rhoads Art School live show. And when I was invited on, it was very open-ended what I can talk about, give a presentation or a demo for roughly a little bit under an hour, and I thought long and hard of what could be the most useful thing that I could share. I ended up deciding on talking about an exercise that I've been doing for about a decade by now. So I'm going to talk about master copies, why I think they're so good, some of the different ways I've done them. And yeah, you can see in my studio now, I finally brought back my little Albert Bierstadt master copy, which I've been working on the Met Copyist program for the last 2 months about. And so master copies have sort of been fresh on my mind. I've been doing a lot of them lately, and I've been doing a lot of them to try to push myself and my work into another level. And so without any further ado, thanks again to Eric Rhoads for having me on, and hope you enjoy the show.
It's Art School Live with Eric Rhoads. Now, here's your host, Eric Rhoads.
Welcome to Art School Live. I'm Eric Rhoads from Fine Art Connoisseur, Plein Air Magazine, and lots of other stuff. And today we've got a hot young superstar on. His name is Patrick Okrasinski. It's a tough one to say, but you're going to hear that name more and more. But when you see this guy's work, you're going to be blown away. Let me just show you. He is at a very high level as a painter for the amount of time he's been on this earth. And I got to tell you that I've been painting a long time. I don't know that I could stand up to his work. I mean, he's just incredible. Now, he may have started young, but and he's still young. He's under 30, and he's an incredible painter. And he's going to tell you something he discovered that actually is going to help you become a better painter. So you want to hang in there for that today. Okay, now, Patrick, we are very excited to learn what you're going to do. So now you got to tell us what's going on.
Cool. Let me just adjust this. Welcome to my little studio.
Yeah, I
It's
like it.
very very humble beginnings, but I've
No,
got some
no, no. We don't judge.
awesome. Cool. So the thing I'm gonna talk about today is master copies. This painting, it's my painting in a sense, but it's not actually my painting because
That's a Levitan, isn't it?
it's a Shishkin.
Shishkin. I'm
Close.
sorry.
I
Well, I
have
knew it was
I have a
Russian.
Levitan up in. I actually should take it because it's one of my favorite paintings.
All right. Well, one thing that I'll mention while he's getting that painting
This is
is
Levitan. If you could see it, it's
wow,
by the
beautiful.
whirlpool.
Yeah.
It's actually, in real life, it's 2 meters big, but my copy is a lot smaller. It's
So I want to tell you guys,
so
for everybody who's listening, and we're going to get into this with Patrick, but um, we're going to talk about why master copying will change your work. But there's a couple of rules about master copies. Okay. Do you know what they are, Patrick?
uh, if you make one the same size, don't tell the authorities.
If you make one the same size, you are actually committing fraud. You're actually
Oh,
breaking the law, right? And especially if you try to sell it as an original. So
yeah.
the rule the museums have is if you go to a museum and you're allowed to do a master copy in person, which they let you do in Russia and they do it a lot of places, you're not allowed to do it the same size. That's the first thing. The second thing is you cannot ever try to pass it off as your own. So you cannot put your signature on the front. What you can do is you can write the words after Levitan or after Shishkin or whoever the artist is, but you have to write the words after on there. I mean, that's the protocol. And you can, on the back of that painting, you can say, this is a master copy I did of Levitan trying to teach. Now, a lot of people frown on the idea of selling master copies, but that what's most important, and I've sold master copies, what's most important is that you're honest about it, because you're trying to learn from it. So let's talk about master copying, Patrick. What have you got to tell us?
Cool. Well, I don't think I've ever sold a master copy of my own. kind of like to make them and have them around the house instead of my own artwork.
I
Uh,
totally agree.
so this frame is still unfinished, but it's going to be in the dining room very soon. I have this Emilio Sanchez Perrier that I stole from the dining room right now, and so these are paintings that I've been working on more recently. But I wasn't always working on paintings like these. The first master copies I ever did were actually really really humble. I think uh, I sent some images of some of the first master copies I ever did. They were actually done digitally on Photoshop before I was even painting with oils and a brush.
Okay, so
So
here's one, right? Is this
yeah,
right?
so that was about 8 years ago. I had just gotten into college. I just got out of high school. I thought I wanted to go into illustration. I didn't really know about the fine art world, but I knew that I wanted to learn to draw. And I had already known by then, because it's an exercise that I'd already been doing for a few years, that one of the most important ways to learn was to study the masters, study those who had already figured it out. And so master copies, so both of these are by Sargent. Then there are also some landscape master copies in there. Master copies, you can do them in any medium, you can do them in any size, and you can do them at any level of refinement. So you don't have to make a huge painting that takes you weeks and weeks like this. I'm doing it because I'm at a certain stage in my career when I want to figure out how to make paintings like that. And so that's what I'm trying to study from masters like Shishkin or Levitan or others. I uh, just the last few weeks, I was actually at the Metropolitan for their copyist program, and I've been copying this just amazing painting by Albert Bierstadt. I think there's an image of that. Yeah, that's it. It's been just a great experience, and I've learned so much and really, really nuanced things. But you don't have to start there. That's where I am right now.
Okay,
You know,
I'm gonna interrupt for just a second, and let's see here if I can put myself on screen. This is a master copy
oh
I
boy.
did 25 years ago. It's not very good, but it was a Jerome painting, and the reason I did it is because I wanted to learn from it. And now that I can paint, it doesn't hold up as well as it did, but it was something that was an important lesson. So, talk to me about the nuances that you get when you're learning to master copy, because a lot of people are going to be like, "Well, why should I bother? Why should I go through this?"
I'm gonna track it back to what it was like doing master copies as a beginner. So one of the issues you have as a beginner is you want to figure out how to paint, but you don't know the subject matter. Maybe you're stuck at home. Maybe you can't go to all these beautiful locations. So you could copy from a photograph, or you could set up a still life. But the thing that master copies offer as an exercise for an absolute beginner, for someone that doesn't that's really just stepping into the world of art and painting and learning the chops, is it's almost a foolproof exercise. So you already have a painting that you love and admire, and you want to learn from it. And it's as if the language is already there. Painting is a visual language. And so if you're trying to learn just the chops of painting, the words, the grammar, like how to form a sentence, how to form a painting, how to make something hang and work. If you're copying a painting, there's almost no way you can go wrong. You're going to be exposed to great art, to painting that's way above your pay scale, that you don't quite understand what you're appreciating just yet. But just by doing the copies and by exposing yourself over time, you're not just going to get better at painting. You're going to learn all the little technicalities about composition and color and edge work. But a big part of doing copies is just exposing yourself to good painting and developing your taste.
So,
And
a
so,
little feedback on that. Just
mm-hmm. Yes, Eric? Oh,
Eric is actually, he had a little technical issue, so you can go ahead with your
okay,
presentation.
I'll keep going.
I dropped out for a second. I hit the wrong button. I apologize. But when when you're copying a master painting, one of the things that I think is so important is your copying, right? And so you want to really strive not to make it your own. You want to learn from the artist. You're there to figure out what they're doing. And what I found is that if I copy something that's a masterwork once or twice a year, even though I've been painting now for 25 years, the things that I learned from copying that master painting 20 years ago, I'm going to notice a lot of things I didn't even pay attention to then. You mentioned edges, for instance,
Mhm.
right? So I I would look at a painting and try to copy it, but I didn't even think about edges, and so I didn't even notice the edges. But today, edges are everything for me. So little things like that. But the other thing I noticed, Patrick, is when painting a face, I struggled with this one. I was copying Winterhalter, was a great German portrait artist, and I noticed that one little tiny change that was probably an eighth of an inch of an indent changed the painting from looking fat to thin. And it was something that that artist had figured out that I never knew.
Yeah, I, I feel like I've done the exact same thing. So one of those images I had of the portraits I've done, because I do a little bit of portraiture, even though I'm primarily a landscape painter, was this portrait of Sargent. I went back, and a few years later, I copied, the exact same one, and so I think there might be like 4 years of a difference, and it's night and day. It's tough to see with the glare, but it's the painting of Henry James by John Singer Sargent. And yeah, so even copying the exact same painting, you're spot on. You'll notice very, very different things. And so, how you can start doing copies. I've done copies in a lot of different ways, not just like the full painting. I've done much smaller copies, and often working smaller and doing smaller copies is a much more easy and accessible way. And so, for instance, I don't always do them in oils. Sometimes I do them in my sketchbooks with pencil. So I have a few of my sketchbooks here to show what those look like.
Okay. Are you going to actually do some copying today?
I maybe at the end
All
I
right.
could go
Yeah.
into
Okay.
it, but
Yeah.
so sometimes when I copy, I really focus in on just one aspect of what I want to learn from the artist. And
So
so
if you were on a mission to get better at trees, since you have tree painting behind you, you
that
could in
that's a big
theory you could in theory then just say, all right, I'm just going to go from Shishkin to Levitan to Scott Christensen to Clyde Aspavig. I'm just going to copy their trees just so I can learn how they do it.
yeah, yeah, that's basically it. And it sounds deceptively easy, but it really is that. When you are copying master paintings, you will soak it in no matter what you do.
Yeah.
It's I really think it's a foolproof exercise. And I went to an academy and I was studying there, doing figurative art at the Florence Academy of Art. And when I first went there, I was really surprised that not that many people were doing copies.
Yeah.
And I think uh, I don't know if I can take some credit, but after my first year there, they actually put copies into the program as a part-time class over.
Well, it's interesting. If you go to the Sarakov Institute in Moscow, or to any of the Royal Academy of Fine Art training in throughout Russia, part of what you're required to do is master copies.
Yeah, which I think that's probably how it should be.
Yeah.
And historically, in the École des Beaux Arts in Paris, I think half of the curriculum was doing master copies either at the Louvre, which was one of the main reasons for the Louvre's existence in the late 1700s, early 1800s. It was for artists to be able to make good copies
Yeah.
and learn and to almost develop
Yeah.
the artists of Paris and France and to bring the artwork up to
So
teach them.
if you were doing a copy, you're going to show us your sketchbook here in a second, but if you were doing a copy of that fashion or that Levitan painting there, or Shishkin, I guess you said, would you try to figure out what his palette is, or would you just use the palette that you're accustomed to?
So for this painting, I was trying to figure out what he was doing in his palette. When I'm painting in my studio, especially, I have a very extended palette, which is similar to what I could find about Shishkin. He used a very extended palette. He used a lot of earth colors, burnt umber, raw umber, burnt raw sienna, yellow ochres, Venetian, English reds, all different sorts of things. And then also more chromatic colors, the equivalent of what we have today as cadmiums and ultramarines and cobalts and Prussian blues. So, his palette, it really ran the gamut. And so that was something I was studying. And I was going back and researching what his unfinished paintings might look like, what he probably did to achieve a painting of that finish. He was probably working in stages, so he probably had a detailed drawing and then an underpainting and then a layer or two over that, but still painting very directly. So that, for a painting, for a copy like this, that is all a consideration. And for the copy I've been working on at the Met, I've really been reading up about Bierstadt and really closely looking at the painting and looking at how the paint is layered and how he uses texture and what he probably did to achieve all the effects he did. So for me right now, that is something I'm looking at. It's not something I always was looking at though, because it's not something that I could always see. But now, even though I've been, it's been years since I've graduated from the academy and I've been more or less working as an emerging artist, I'm still doing them because I still think there's so much to learn. And I still admire them. And
Well, there's a guy I think it's a guy in the comments who says, I'm trying to find out where he studied, but uh, Alaki Akelovich Brashmanchkin, I probably butchered it, because it's Akelovich, that means he's Russian because that's probably his father's name.
likely,
He said he was not allowed to paint an original work for 7 years when he studied.
mm. um, maybe they
Just
didn't want
you
him to.
don't you don't have
No,
to judge. I'm just telling you what he said.
that's interesting. People have all sort of different ideas on how you should start, but I started doing master copies very early on, but yeah, uh, none of these copies were from a live painting, as the guest said. So that's not too dissimilar. I was working
Okay.
for reproductions.
Now, because there's a number of people who just tuned in, I want to show a little bit of your work, and I want you to tell me if these are originals or master copies. All right.
Okay,
All right.
that's an original.
Original.
Yeah, original, original, original.
Those rocks are amazing, by the way.
Thank you. Original.
And you told me that was a plein air piece.
So that's a piece from this summer, and it was a plein air piece. I think I spent 4 to 5 hours on it. And the funny story of it was I went down to this pond and it was about 12 in the afternoon, and I had really been looking at and being inspired by the works of George Inness and Sanford Gifford, which are very famous American painters from the 1800s. And
Hudson River
so,
School. Yeah.
yeah, and so, with them in the back of my mind, I created this sunset painting
Oh, you cut out.
inspired by the scene. I was working outdoors. I was taking the trees and arranging them. And, in some ways, that painting, some people might call that a master copy because it was so heavily influenced by the works of Sanford Gifford
Right.
and George Inness
Right.
in a way.
But you
So
made up the light
I made that up. It was,
because that's not 12 noon.
no, I have a picture of it out there. It's buried in my Instagram, but it's, just that painting set up on the easel and it's clear blue sky in the background. It's
So did you
it's kind of a
change the light when you were on location, or did you do it after you got back home?
on location. I
You did.
started.
So what's that like? Because this is something a lot of the tonalists do is they use the scene for the inspiration, but they completely change the tone and the light.
Yeah, I yeah, in a sense. And George Ernest's later works were very tonalist. He started out in the Hudson River School, but then towards the late 1800s, he got a little bit like that. Um, yeah, no, I mean you're definitely spot on. I sort of had an idea of what I wanted it to look like, and the way I started it, it's actually really easy. It was mostly a raw umber wash, And so most of the trees in that painting, you'll see it's painted relatively transparently and a lot of burnt umber, and then a little bit of cools in the left side and more warm reds in the middle under where the sun should be setting. But so it was a surprisingly straightforward painting to make. It's very limited and restrained. And so after I figured out the drawing in raw umber, I went in, I added the sky, I painted the reflection exactly the same, except it's slightly darker yellows, but lighter shadows because, you know, eventually you get to a point in your career when, or as a painter, you know how light works and you know the gradient of the sky and you know how water reflections work. They're darker, except in the darkest parts where they're actually a little bit lighter. And so you can start playing around with that in a sense.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's see some of those sketches.
Cool. And you know, these are only a couple sketchbooks that I found because I have pages and pages and pages of these more everywhere. So, you know, these are some compositional master studies that I would do.
So that would be Edgar Payne.
I think some of these are.
Yeah.
I wrote the names down. I have Compton, so E. Harrison Compton. I definitely have read Edgar Payne's book. It's worth its weight in gold. It's one of the best books out there. And I definitely have copied his paintings, but I don't know if these ones are his per se. But so the way I go about copying these is the way I think about the composition. I'm looking at the big masses and the big lines and looking at just the different arrangements of all these different lines. And so, you know, each one of these little sketches is probably 10 to 15 minutes. In a way, it's a little bit of an exercise in drawing, but it's mostly an exercise in composition because most of the work is actually happening in my mind. I'm thinking about the composition. I'm being exposed to the composition. I'm seeing how their composition works. I'm dissecting whether or not they're working in tonal masses or maybe line or maybe foreground, middle, background, because you know the way people thought about composition through the ages is also different. It also depends on the artist. Most people today think about masses, and that's an approach from Edgar Payne. You know, he's thinking about his masses, and he's also thinking about the line and the different structures, whether something's a steelyard composition or a circular thing, things like that.
Okay.
Then I have some. I have this smaller sketchbook, and so this is a sketchbook I use with me. It's been sitting on my shelf, but you know, before I was a full-time artist, I worked a job as a valet for 6 years out of high school.
So you're supporting yourself as an artist now?
It's my main source of income. I keep a low overhead, but you know, it's been going.
Good.
You know, just being bored at work, I take my little sketchbook, and so that's a copy of a Ramon Casas drawing.
Uh-huh.
And so, you know, if you're just somewhere and you're bored, you could just take out a little sketchbook. That's a Sargent drawing that I copied.
Well, those little moleskins are wonderful. I keep those in my back pocket all the time.
Yeah, and you know, it helps you stay active and stay drawing.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, you should always be drawing. That's what they say.
Yeah, and then you know, to more refined copies. Oh, you know, these are more of the same. Just dozens and dozens of little compositions.
Hold it still. Yeah. All right. So you're in that case, you're trying to figure out composition.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just posted a link to the Edgar Payne composition book in the chat. Okay, there's a Velasquez.
Yeah, so that's the Juan de Pareja.
Very nice copy.
You know, and you know, even if you're doing a copy like that where it's a pencil drawing of a oil portrait, you're still being exposed to the painting. You're studying the line. You're studying the drawing composition, and so even that is a really great exercise. And the next exercise, which I've done dozens and dozens of, when I had to actually learn how to paint in oils, because I didn't start painting in oils, but working small and doing small copies was a really important exercise for me just to get me comfortable with the medium of oil painting. So, you know, these are about, I don't know, a dozen and a half these little 5x7s that I would just sit down and do tons of. You know, I have Isaac Levitan. I have a lot of Levitan because he was a big influence on me.
And are you copying them out of books?
Uh, Books or computer screens.
Yeah. Okay. And in both cases, they're photographs, and so they're not necessarily going to read exactly like the paintings. I have a buddy who owns a Levitan, and I'd like to go steal it, but I don't steal. So
Gosh, I can't blame you. I think, you know, he was one of my favorite painters. So, you know, these copies were done at a very small scale, and what I was mostly focused on was trying to have a smaller thumbnail of the painting, and I was focusing on mostly accurate color and semi-accurate drawing, and these were really an exercise to just soak in landscape painting in a
right,
sense. I wasn't focusing on making a full finished painting, but I was interested in the full image of the painting, but not on the full scale in a sense. You know, because
sure,
if you're working a painting like that, there are all these other considerations that you need to start accounting for. But when you limit yourself to a small scale, you'll still figure out primarily the color mixing, a little bit of the composition, a little bit of the drawing. But, you know, mostly these are color studies in a sense.
yeah. Well, that's a really great way to do it. Also, you're going to get more frustrated on a bigger piece.
Yeah.
My first copies were these giant paintings. It was really hard. Oh wow, yeah, you got a lot.
These are not copies. A lot of these are from life, but
Yeah,
I really stand by, you know, little 5x7 sketches.
right.
It's a great way to really get a lot of mileage when you're starting out as a painter, and, you know, focus on the full composition and just the full color. So, you know, doing little master's copies on a tiny scale like this, yeah, it's good stuff.
Well,
And
it's kind of, it's kind of like the Kevin McPherson theory. I'm sure it's not original, but he always talks about when you're learning to plein air paint, go out, give yourself 30 minutes and paint small 8x10s or smaller. And really, if you really want to get a lot of progress, then paint a lot of master copies. I never really thought about that. I've painted, a few over the years, but yeah, I think that's a great thing. If you really want to ramp up, you probably would see a lot of progress if you painted 30 master copies you know, in 6 months or a year or something.
yeah, I totally agree. I've heard the quote from Kevin McPherson because I have his books actually, and I couldn't agree more with that idea. And the idea of that repetition and just getting your mileage and doing a lot of starts, I think it's really important. I think a lot of people are probably really familiar with the analogy of the pottery class and the professor that split his class and let themselves decide which group that they'd be in, to the students that would be graded on the amount of pots, just the pounds of clay that they've thrown by the end of the term,
Yeah.
and the students that spent the entire term working on one perfect pot. And what you would see is that these students would spend just months working on just one pot. And the students that came in every single day, made something new, tried something different, learned something. By the end, they were just miles ahead.
Well,
And
we
some,
have a video out called the Master's Touch or something like that. It's about chunk learning. We did it with Brian Mark Taylor, and the idea of chunk learning is exactly what you're saying: is that rather than trying to do all pieces of everything, like let's use painting as an example. Rather than trying to do the whole painting 30 or 40 times, do that one tree 30 or 40 times till you get it perfect, till you can do it in your sleep, till you can do it almost instinctively, and then move on to the next subject matter, a cloud or whatever, and keep copying that, because that's where you grow the fastest. There is the Malcolm Gladwell theory of 10,000 hours, but that mastery can be accomplished faster by chunking.
Mhm. That's really interesting. I think that has a lot of overlap, but I've never heard it quite explained that way. And I guess, the compositional studies that I showed earlier, those are kind of chunking composition, would you say?
Yep. Yep,
Yeah.
they
So,
are.
I can get behind that for sure.
Okay,
Um,
what's next?
well, so I guess I could show some of the more refined paintings. Those were some of the paintings I did earlier on, and really, I don't do that many master copies at that scale anymore. Most of those paintings were done 4 years ago, and eventually you come to a point where you're comfortable with certain things. You're comfortable doing a color study. You could nail it in an hour or 2 hours if you really sat down for it. And so it's like, okay, what's next as an artist? Like, how else, could you grow? And then you start looking more towards more refined work or larger work per se. So I would do larger scale master copies. So, this is a bit larger than those other ones. This is a Spanish artist, Carlos de Hais, however you might spell that. It's a, little 8 by 12, but even this is a step up from there. And at this stage, it starts to inform some of my larger paintings. I say larger, I'm about to pull up a 9 by 12. But so, a little painting like this.
That's
It's,
lovely.
yeah, it's, really small. It's one of my favorite paintings that I've ever done, and I'm keeping it for myself, obviously. But this has influences from Shishkin. This painting I did 2 years ago, and when I was looking at this painting, I was looking a lot at some forest interiors by Ivan Shishkin.
Well, and I think that's a really great idea. Is the idea being that you say, okay, I really want to learn how Shishkin painted. You start out by copying some Shishkins, and then you say, okay, I'm going to do an original composition, but I'm going to try to make it everything about what I learned from Shishkin, or or whomever. And of course, one of the other benefits is that when you're you walk into a museum and you see a painting you would love to have, if you can do a master copy of that and have it hanging in your home. I have a master copy of a Rembrandt that Eric Johnson did that is spectacular, that is hanging in my office. And I'm never going to own a Rembrandt. You could, if I had $1 billion, I probably couldn't own one. So this is
For
the
a
next
billion,
best
you
thing.
might.
I'm sorry.
For a billion, you might.
Yeah, well, I don't think I'd pay $1 billion for anything. Oh, first
Yeah,
off, I don't have to worry about
yeah,
that.
yeah. And I just realized in the edge of my screen, you can see another little copy that I have hanging in my studio. This little Fontaine Latour.
Ah, nice. Yeah.
And I have I got really lucky. I found a period frame that a friend was giving away that it fit that size. So
Okay, so what I want to do is ask people to put your questions in the chat, but also I want everybody who is in the chat to make a commitment before Christmas. I want to see one master copy. It can be small. Pick one painting that you love from any master. I want to see one master copy, and give me a yes if you're willing to commit. All right. We'll get them going here, Patrick. You're inspiring a lot of people.
awesome. Yeah, I was thinking of doing a little challenge myself for the month of January to do a master copy a day, just to sort of more so portraits, I'd say, because I do focus mostly on landscape paintings, but I think my portraiture is kind of lacking of where I would want it to be. But uh,
Oh, I'm
yeah.
getting a lot of yeses.
Oh, that's awesome.
All right.
Everyone's about to become a better painter.
So we'll post this, Patrick, and we'll put your name on the Instagram post that basically it's the master copy before Christmas challenge, and we'll give away a prize. We'll come up with a prize.
Awesome.
Any ideas on what the prize should be?
I don't know. I don't usually know what goes for prizes.
All right. Well, we'll
Maybe
come
maybe
up
a
with
nice
something.
brush set.
Say that again.
Maybe some nice brushes.
Yeah.
That's one thing I've actually picked up on doing the Bierstadt master copy that I had just been finishing at the Met. I wish I had the painting in the studio, but I need to pick it up on Friday. That's going to be our closing reception. And one thing I learned is that the way he applied paint with his brushes, and I was looking at the painting in person. I think just on Monday was our last session, and I went in on the session, and I think I spent 2 hours just looking at the painting, just looking at all the little different parts of the painting, looking at the texture. There are things I had already noticed about that Bierstadt painting. The use of his texture in the mountains versus the foliage of the trees. And one of the big conclusions I came to is the way he was actually painting those was probably not too dissimilar from Bob Ross in a sense.
Oh, that's
So
scary.
well, but there's this is what I mean by that. So if you, because I went and watched a Bob Ross video like that night, and Bob Ross uses his brushes very indirectly. You know, when I went to the academy, I used a lot of filbert brushes that were, you know, like this shape.
Yeah.
Right? Thicker on one side, thinner on the other, and I basically just used these brushes. And it didn't even occur to me to use large brushes, like, you know, these large painter flats like this. I think Bierstadt used a brush like this to paint his entire sky, to be honest.
Huh.
And then, you know, the texture that he got in the rocks, he was using a lot of big brushes, a lot of dabbing, a lot of going like this. He wasn't going a lot like this, but, you know, he's loading his paintbrush up and applying the paint in very particular ways.
If you have not had a chance to see it, look at some Bierstadt studies, because all those big paintings were done from the studies, because he didn't do those big ones on location. But
Right.
a friend of mine has a collection of Bierstadt studies, and they are to die for. They're just absolutely incredible, because you can, you know, they're not as refined. They're rough. They're, you know, just trying to get indications, which is what a lot of us do. But they're really worth seeing.
Yeah. They're at the Metropolitan, you can only see some of his studies in the visible storage wing, which
Yeah.
is kind of just a shame. Like they need to update that part.
Yeah, well, that's not, you know, only crazy people like us like studies. Now we're back to Patrick Okrasinski. Did I get it right?
You got it right. Yeah.
And your buddy Leo Mancini just sent me a text, and he says you're a straight up guy and one of the better painters, and he's really proud of you for doing this.
Oh, Leo, gosh, I only have good things to say about Leo. He's been
Yeah.
one of the there weren't a lot of landscape painters when I was in the academy.
Yeah.
But Leo sort of came out of the same school that I did. He went to Florence, I went to the US. And so from very early on, he's been one of the greatest guys. And if anyone's, you know, interested in, I think he said that you've been really enjoying his Mako supply, huh?
Oh, well, I was going to tell you, and we'll talk about this. He's not really marketing this heavily yet, and he'll probably be upset that we tell all these people about it. But his panels are absolutely incredible. They're called Mako. It's Mako.com, I think. Mako panels. And he's only providing them to a handful of artists at the moment, because he's not really set up for the demand, but he's doing some on aluminum, and he's doing others on foam and so on. And I took him to New Zealand with me. I took both his, and I also took multimedia artboard panels with me, which were also wonderful. And I love them. And what I love about it is, you know, I was painting with TM Nicholas, who came up to my place this summer. And, you know, we're all painting little 9x12s, and he's painting 30x40s on location. And that inspired me. And he said, well, you got to try these Mako panels. And so I ordered a bunch of those big ones from Leo, and I did some this summer that I just loved. And I'm doing 30x40s in 2 hours instead of 9x12s in 2 hours. So that's really fun.
Nice.
So anyway, we'll try to find Leo's website and post it in the comments. So maybe he'll sell you guys some panels.
Yeah, Leo's been great. And
all right, Patrick, what else have you got that you want to discuss about copies before we go? Any particular thing? He's looking around for ideas. Okay.
I guess you know, the only things that I have here that I didn't really cover are some of the more portrait copies that I did.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay.
I put up just to show how often and how many copies I've actually done. I have this Sargent. I have this other Sargent that I always really liked. Had it the Spaniard, I think. This like Dennis Miller Bunker. a bunch of other sergeants, Carolus Duran. I don't know this guy's name. I don't know her name either.
That one was, I think it was Jerome.
Oh,
Not that one, the man with the mustache.
oh, this is a painting of Jerome?
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. The mustache. And I mean, I just, these are only the ones that I could find over a very small amount of time. This was a single session for Rembrandt. I guess one of the other things about copying that I found to be really helpful, and very much so for me, when I was a student, I would be painting all day long, and then you get kind of tired or exhausted, and copying was almost a little trick of how to keep yourself engaged. Because when I was doing uh, figure studies or portraits from life, sitting down at the end of the day and having something that you could easily work on in the comfort of your own home in your studio, whether it was just a pencil sketch in my sketchbook or whether I was taking out my paints, there's something about copying where it's almost energizing. I don't know how to
Yeah.
explain it.
Well, and it's changing your mindset. I think that one of the nice things, I'm trying to do this more, is I want to get some of those wall easels. Jack Richardson sells them. And that way I can have 2 or 3 easels in a small space. And I want to have a station set up for pastel, one for watercolor, one for oil, so that I can just move from one to the other if I get bored. But I think it'd be cool to have one of those stations be, always have a master copy going, because it's a great way. Sometimes when you get tired and you lose your energy, if you want to keep painting, but you start making stupid mistakes, then you screw up your painting. This way you could kind of take a break, go over to something, learn something new, and then you're making master copies. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. So are there any other questions in the chat? Maybe I could.
No, I think the only other question is the same question I asked you when we first met, and that is, how did you get to be so good at such a young age?
Well, I think I credit a lot to master copying, because I think that was one of the biggest differences that I saw me doing versus other students.
Yeah.
And particularly the way I was doing master copies is I wasn't just blindly doing these copies. I had very specific questions on what I wanted to learn and what I wanted to improve on. I did tons of drawings that I also have stored away of master copies, like more finished drawings. A big part of it was that I went to the Florence Academy of Art in the US, which is no longer active. And so the teachers sort of split up. It's still active in Florence, Italy, but now there's also the Grand Central Atelier and the Lime Academy.
Well, the teachers went to the Lime Academy. Some of them
So
did anyway.
my teachers are now
Yeah.
at the Academy.
Yeah, and they're doing a great job there. We just did a story on them in Fine Art Connoisseur. Well,
So-
Patrick, I should mention that you just did your first plein air event, which was in Sonoma. Congratulations on that. And we're going to be seeing you around. I want everybody to give Patrick a round of applause. It's not easy to get on camera and talk in front of all these people. And you did a great job today. You taught us something, you inspired us. And we're all going to keep an eye on you, and we're going to start seeing you at more plein air events. We're going to start seeing you in the higher end galleries. I mean, you look at the quality of your work, your original work, it's spectacular. And you have a long and bright career ahead of you, and we're all very proud of you.
Gosh, thank you so much, Eric. It's really been a pleasure, being here with you today. And this is the first time I've ever done a live stream, so hopefully I didn't mess that up too much. But it's been
No, you didn't mess up. You're doing a great job. You're very composed. All right.
Awesome.
Thank you, Patrick. So our guest today, Patrick Okrasinski. I think I got it. And give him a thumbs up, applause, share. And remember, we're going to do a master copy challenge. Master copy, any master. Let's make it a dead master. Okay. That way we're not copying any living masters. A dead master copy before Christmas, which means you don't have a lot of time, because you're going to be shopping and looking for my gift, which is going to, it's going to take all your time to find something that special. Just saying. No, don't do that. Thank you for watching. Thanks to Patrick. Get signed up for Watercolor Live. It is just exploding, and we're really really gonna have a good time with that. Looking forward to it. As a matter of fact, we've changed some things. We got some new things happening, and I just previewed some of it yesterday. My tech team got me on a call and they showed me some cool new stuff we're going to be doing. And but most important, you're going to get a lot out of it. You're going to become a watercolorist or a better watercolorist and have a lot of opportunity to learn. That's coming up in late January. So get signed up because prices continue to escalate. As a matter of fact, they went up on Thanksgiving Day. So the next price increase is coming up. So you want to make sure you get in there. All right. Thank you for watching. And this is Art School Live. I'm Eric Rhoads. Have a great